They told you the EV market was collapsing. They told you demand was fading. They told you Canada just hit a rough patch. But what if none of that is true? What if the entire story is hiding a much bigger shift happening underneath the surface? This is Bo Kaufman, and welcome to the Sanity Project Deep Dive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood economic stories in Canada right now: electric vehicles, battery costs, and the real reason projects like Honda's Ontario plant are being frozen. Because this isn't about demand. It's about a cost revolution that's already happened, and Canada is just starting to feel the consequences. Let's listen in as Rachel Bennett and Michael Reeves break it down.
I want you to picture something for a second. Just imagine a really staggering piece of industrial infrastructure.
Like truly massive.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine this $15 billion complex just sprawling across Ontario. I mean, this was designed to be the gleaming crown jewel of North American automotive manufacturing. An absolute behemoth of an EV and battery plant.
Right.
But then imagine someone walking up to the main breaker and just, pulling the plug.
Just shutting
it all down. The blueprints are shelved. The supply chain contracts are completely frozen. And the whole massive enterprise just halts in its tracks.
And honestly, the sheer scale of the capital destruction there is what really catches your attention. I mean, you do not freeze $15 billion unless the underlying math of your entire business model is fundamentally broken down.
And that is exactly what we saw in May 2026, right, with Honda's planned facility in Ontario. But if you turn on the Canadian news right now or, read the mainstream business press, the narrative is completely uniform. The media is loudly calling this a massive EV demand failure.
Oh, yeah, everywhere you look.
The story they're telling is that the public is just fatigued, right? Like, they don't want electric vehicles anymore, so Honda essentially had no choice but to retreat.
Which completely, it entirely ignores the unit economics actually happening on the ground. The media is looking at a symptom and diagnosing the entirely wrong disease.
Exactly. And that is our core mission for today's deep dive. We've got a pretty dense stack of sources on the table today. We're looking at a policy brief from Transport Canada, some really good trade reporting from NPR, market data from S&P Global, pricing and logistics news from Electric, and this incredibly revealing internal white paper from the Sanity Project.
It's a lot to go through.
It is, but we are going to tear through all of this to prove one central argument, and that is that the Canadian media is entirely misreading the Honda plant freeze.
100%.
This is not an EV demand failure. It is unequivocally a battery cost competitiveness failure. And every single thread we pull today is going to lead back to that one crucial distinction.
Because it's really the only lens through which the current geopolitical shifts and really the market shifts make any logical sense.
Right.
If you assume the problem is consumer demand, then the actions of both the automakers and the federal government seem completely irrational.
Yeah.
But if you view it through the lens of battery cost competitiveness, suddenly every bizarre policy reversal, every canceled factory, it just falls perfectly into place.
It totally does. Now, before we jump into the raw data, I really want to hear from you, the listener. Drop a comment right now. What do you think Canada should actually do about the massive influx of Chinese electric vehicles?
It's a big question.
It really is. Do we deploy tariffs to protect our legacy manufacturing bases, or do we, embrace the cheaper imports for the sake of consumer adoption? This is arguably the most critical industrial question of the decade, and we want to know where you stand. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand why a major legacy automaker just walks away from a multi-billion-dollar commitment, we really have to look at the S&P Global data regarding a very specific threshold in the automotive world.
Right, the magic number.
Exactly. It's the $100 per kilowatt hour barrier. And this number, it dictates everything.
Why is that exact number so important?
So $100 per kilowatt hour is the generally accepted threshold where the total manufacturing cost of an electric vehicle reaches price parity with a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle.
Like a standard gas car.
Right, exactly. But the key is it reaches that parity entirely without the crutch of government subsidies.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so above that mark, the manufacturer is in a really precarious position. They're either taking a brutal loss on every single unit sold, or they're artificially inflating the MSRP to the point where, consumers just revolt.
Or they're just utterly dependent on government rebate programs to move the inventory at all.
Exactly. But once you cross below that $100 threshold, the unit economics completely flip. you can build and sell EVs profitably to the mass market.
So let's look at where the industry actually stands according to the Sanity Project white paper, because the numbers here are just wild.
They really are.
Chinese firms, specifically BYD and CATL, they didn't just cross the $100 threshold, they utterly obliterated it. As of 2024, they were producing battery cells at $56 to $60 per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, almost half the threshold.
Meanwhile, Western automakers, your Fords, GMs, and Honda, they're trapped at around $110 to $130 per kilowatt hour.
And this is where we have to examine the chemistry divide, because this cost gap, it isn't just about cheaper labor in China.
Right.
It's a fundamental divergence in chemical engineering philosophy. The Western OEMs basically bet the farm on NMC chemistry, so that's nickel, manganese, cobalt.
Why did they choose that route?
Well, they chose NMC because it historically offered higher energy density, which translates directly to the longer range that North American consumers supposedly demand. But those metals are incredibly volatile commodities.
Yeah, cobalt relies on a really fragile and, frankly, problematic supply chain.
Exactly. And nickel is subject to massive global price swings. While the Chinese manufacturers, they took a completely different path with LFP, which is lithium iron phosphate.
So they looked at iron, which is, dirt cheap and universally abundant, and just decided to build an empire on it.
Pretty much. And what's fascinating here is how the Chinese engineering teams approached the problem. A decade ago, LFP was largely dismissed by the West as like a golf cart battery.
A golf cart battery, really?
Yeah, it was considered way too heavy and just lacking the energy density required for highway-capable vehicles. But companies like BYD, they relentlessly optimized the cathode structure.
They just brute force the engineering.
Yeah, they spent years tweaking the packing density, improving the thermal management, and scaling the manufacturing processes to a level the West simply didn't anticipate. They essentially solved the density problem through relentless iterative engineering, while the West was still banking on volatile nickel and cobalt.
I'm looking at this engineering divide, and I'm trying to find a way to really conceptualize it. It feels like Western automakers decided to build their houses using custom-milled aerospace-grade titanium framing.
Right.
It's incredibly strong, it's lightweight, but the materials cost an absolute fortune, and sourcing them is just a nightmare. You have to price the house at a massive premium just to break even.
That's a great way to put it.
Meanwhile, the Chinese manufacturers figured out how to chemically treat cheap, universally available timber so that it performs almost as well as the titanium.
Yes.
And they prefab the timber, they snap the houses together in a fraction of the time, and they sell them for literally half the price.
That is a highly accurate way to frame the structural mechanics of this market. And when the consumers inevitably flock to the well-built, half-priced timber house, the titanium builder turns to the press and claims there's a sudden, mysterious drop in the demand for housing.
Which is exactly what's happening with Honda.
Exactly.
Lead it back to the core thesis here. They didn't freeze that Ontario plant because Canadians stopped wanting cars.
No, not at all.
Their executives looked at the spreadsheet. They saw that their NMC packs were coming in at $130 a kilowatt hour while their global competitors were sitting at $60. And they realized the factory was functionally obsolete before the foundation was even poured.
You cannot outmarket a $70 per kilowatt hour deficit. You just can't.
You really can't.
You absolutely cannot. And this industrial reality, it's causing massive tectonic shifts in federal policy too. If the automakers are losing the cost war on the factory floor this severely, we really have to look at how the Canadian government is attempting to manage the fallout.
And the policy response is where things take a truly bizarre turn. Let's dig into the NPR trade reporting for a second.
Let's do it.
Back in 2024, Canada was marching in lockstep with the United States. The policy was a hardline 100% tariff on Chinese EVs.
Very unambiguous.
Completely. The message was, we are building a North American fortress to protect our legacy manufacturing base. But fast forward to January of 2026, and Prime Minister Mark Carney completely shatters that alignment.
It was a massive pivot.
Huge. He travels to Beijing and drops that 100% tariff down to a standard 6.1%, capped at 49,000 vehicles a year.
We have to examine the mechanism behind that reversal.
Right.
Because Canada didn't just suddenly decide to abandon its automotive sector.
No, there's always leverage.
Exactly. And the NPR piece details the leverage China utilized. This is what's being called the canola compromise.
The canola compromise.
Yeah. In direct exchange for Canada opening the door to those 49,000 EVs, China agreed to slash its retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola seeds from a punishing 84% down to 15%.
I was reading this, and the geopolitical strategy is almost breathtaking.
It's incredibly calculating.
China essentially weaponized a completely unrelated agricultural export to pry open the North American auto market. They pitted the Canadian prairie provinces right against the Ontario manufacturing sector.
It is a textbook example of trade leverage.
Yeah.
I mean, the federal government was faced with the total collapse of a multi-billion-dollar agricultural export market.
So they caved.
They made a calculated sacrifice. They bet that capping the EV imports at 49,000 units would act as like a sufficient pressure valve to appease the agricultural lobby without totally wiping out domestic auto manufacturing.
But look at the immediate logistical fallout. I mean, according to the Electric reporting, the sheer speed at which the market exploited this tariff drop is stunning.
Oh, it was instantaneous.
And the automaker that capitalized on it first wasn't BYD or NIO, it was Tesla.
Well, Tesla operates with a level of logistical agility that legacy automakers just struggle to match. I mean, the moment that 6.1% tariff was formalized, they treated the US-Canada border as a stark dividing line.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Tesla instantly halted shipments of the Model 3 from their California plant into Canada.
Overnight.
Just completely pivoted their supply chain overnight, routing vehicles directly from Giga Shanghai to Vancouver.
Right.
And because of the structural cost advantages of Chinese manufacturing and, those $60 per kilowatt hour batteries, a China-made Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive is now sitting in the Canadian market at a record low of 39,490 Canadian dollars.
The arbitrage there is just incredible.
It's a massive discrepancy. If you run the currency conversion, that exact same Shanghai-built car is roughly $13,390 cheaper in Canada than the US-built equivalent is right next door in the United States.
While the US-sourced performance model stays firmly at $74,990.
Right. You literally have a scenario where a consumer in Toronto can almost buy 2 base Model 3s for the price of 1 performance model, purely dictated by the origin of the battery cells.
And this pricing reality, it brings us to the most glaring policy contradiction in our source material. We really need to look at the Transport Canada policy brief detailing the EVFP program.
Ah, yes, the Electric Vehicle Affordability Program. I was reading through the parameters of this, and the logic feels completely inverted.
It's wild.
This is a $2.275 billion federal initiative, right? Offering consumers up to a $5,000 rebate on a new EV.
It is the primary demand-side lever the government is using to spur adoption.
But the stipulation for the rebate is that the vehicle must be manufactured in Canada, or in a country that shares a free trade agreement with Canada.
And China does not have an FTA with Canada.
Exactly. So by default, the $39,000 Shanghai-built Tesla, which is objectively the most affordable, capable electric vehicle currently available to a Canadian consumer, is entirely excluded from the government's official affordability program.
And I should just step in here for a moment to set a clear boundary, because we are not approaching this from a partisan angle.
Right, absolutely not.
We are not endorsing a free trade, left-wing, or right-wing political philosophy regarding these tariffs. Our focus is strictly on the objective policy mechanics presented in the Transport Canada and NPR documents.
Just looking at the facts on the ground.
Exactly. And objectively, we are observing a federal apparatus executing 2 policies that are actively canceling each other out.
You have the Prime Minister brokering a deal to let in 49,000 low-cost vehicles to save the canola industry, while simultaneously running a multi-billion-dollar rebate program that acts as a stealth tariff.
Right.
A stealth tariff to protect legacy automakers by excluding those exact same affordable cars. It is a staggering bureaucratic contradiction.
It really reveals a government trying to solve a fundamental industrial math problem using consumer behavioral levers.
Yeah.
The state poured billions of dollars in subsidies into legacy companies, operating on the assumption that those companies would figure out how to scale NMC chemistry down to the $100 threshold.
Then they failed to do so.
They absolutely failed. So the state is now trapped in this cycle of subsidizing uncompetitive vehicles just to keep the factories running, while simultaneously opening a quota for the foreign vehicles that actually solve the engineering puzzle.
Which brings us to the ultimate verdict of this deep dive. The S&P Global data and the Sanity Project white paper make it undeniably clear.
Canada's industrial strategy was built for a race that concluded years ago.
Yeah, the West is still lacing up its track shoes, and BYD is already sitting in the bleachers holding the trophy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the data indicates that the competitive gap isn't just, maintaining its current distance. It is actually accelerating. Well, the Chinese manufacturers are not resting on their LFP optimization. They are rapidly deploying the next phase of engineering, which is known as cell-to-pack, or CTP technology.
Yeah, I see this referenced in the white paper, but I'm struggling with the physical physics of it.
It's complex.
In a traditional battery pack, you have individual cells, right? And you bundle those into modules, and then you bolt those modules into a massive armored casing to protect them.
Exactly.
It's redundant, but it's safe. If they are eliminating the modules entirely with cell-to-pack, doesn't the battery just become a structurally compromised box of volatile chemistry? I mean, how are they doing this without the cars failing crash tests?
That is the genius of the engineering. They aren't just removing the modules, they are redesigning the cells themselves to act as structural components of the vehicle.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Take BYD's Blade battery, for instance. The cells are literally shaped like long, rigid blades. Instead of dropping fragile cells into a heavy, protective module, the robust cells themselves form a honeycomb-like structure that provides torsional rigidity to the chassis.
Oh, wow.
So you completely eliminate the dead weight of the module casing, you drastically reduce the number of internal wiring connections, and you vastly increase the volume utilization of the pack.
So they're packing more active chemistry into the same physical footprint while simultaneously stripping out manufacturing steps.
Precisely. It drives the cost down even further while pushing the energy density of cheap LFP chemistry into the realm where it competes directly with the expensive Western NMC packs.
Unbelievable.
And while legacy automakers are still trying to figure out how to manufacture traditional module-based packs profitably, the external pressure is just mounting.
Yeah, because the white paper notes that BYD is not just passively shipping cars over here, they are laying aggressive groundwork.
They're moving fast.
They are planning to establish 20 Canadian dealerships within the next 12 months. And furthermore, that initial quota of 49,000 vehicles, it's not static.
Right.
Under the terms of the trade agreement, it is scheduled to expand to 70,000 vehicles annually by 2030.
And we really must factor in the total vertical integration of these companies. A firm like BYD doesn't just assemble the car.
No, they do everything.
They mine the lithium, they manufacture the cells, they build the semiconductors, and they literally even own the massive roll-off cargo ships that transport the vehicles across the Pacific.
Which is just insane to think about.
Because they capture the margin at every single step of the supply chain. Their pricing power is virtually limitless. I mean, their entry-level model in the domestic Chinese market, the Seagull, it retails for the equivalent of roughly 13,000 to 14,000 Canadian dollars.
Wow.
Even when you factor in ocean freight, homologation for Canadian safety standards, and the 6.1% tariff, they have an ocean of margin to play with.
So what does this all mean for the legacy manufacturers? I mean, it means the policy debate we are having in North America is fundamentally disconnected from reality. We are debating how to construct legislative moats to protect automakers who are stuck at $130 a kilowatt hour. We're trying to protect a business model that is mathematically obsolete.
It is an entirely unsustainable posture. Government subsidies and consumer rebates, they can bridge a temporary gap while an industry scales up. They cannot permanently bridge a fundamental structural chasm in manufacturing efficiency.
That is the hard truth. The headlines screaming about Honda's plant freeze being a demand failure are just providing cover for an industrial failure.
Absolutely.
That $15 billion complex in Ontario didn't freeze because consumers suddenly developed an aversion to electric motors. It froze because Honda's underlying battery economics render their future vehicles dead on arrival in a global market where the rules of manufacturing have been entirely rewritten.
And this raises an important question, and it really leaves us with a highly provocative scenario to consider.
Let's hear it.
The S&P projections suggest that by 2028, that 49,000 vehicle import quota will be completely saturated. Canadian consumers dealing with inflation and high interest rates are going to be demanding access to these affordable vehicles.
Of course they will.
The political pressure to either drastically raise that quota or drop the tariffs altogether will be immense.
A total collision course.
Exactly. And if, by 2028, The Western legacy automakers still haven't figured out how to engineer their way down to that $100 per kilowatt hour threshold. What happens?
Yeah.
Do the titans of Western manufacturing swallow their pride and enter into politically humiliating agreements to license Chinese battery technology just to keep their assembly lines moving? Or do they look at the math, realize they can't compete, and simply surrender the entire entry-level mass-market vehicle segment to the imports, retreating exclusively to selling high-margin luxury trucks and SUVs?
Licensing the core technology from your biggest geopolitical rival or completely abandoning the everyday consumer. Those are incredibly grim options for the North American auto sector.
Very grim.
But that is the reality of losing the unit economics race. It forces you to look at that frozen $15 billion factory in Ontario in a completely different light. It isn't a temporary pause in construction due to a fickle consumer base. It is a monument to bad math.
Well said.
I want to throw this back to you, the listener. We laid out the data, the chemistry divide, and the policy contradictions today. What do you think Canada should do about Chinese EVs?
We really want to hear from you.
Do we continue to subsidize and protect the domestic plants, even if their underlying math is currently uncompetitive? Or do we open the floodgates, embrace the cell-to-pack technology, and prioritize affordable cars for the consumer? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and they often spark our next investigation.
Yeah, your comments really drive the show.
They do. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a deep dive into the hidden forces shaping our global industries. If you want to dig into the actual S&P market data, read the Transport Canada brief, or review the Sanity Project white paper we dissected today, head over to blog.thesanity.org to check out the research for yourself.
That's all there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.
If this deep dive shifted how you see the EV story, that's exactly the point. Subscribe to the Sanity Project so you don't miss what's actually driving the headlines, not just what you're being told. And if this got you thinking, share it. Let's raise the signal.
If you want more facts and less fear, hit subscribe. Check out the next breakdown wherever you're listening or watching. Stay sane, Canada.